Good evening. You're looking at a live shot of Westminster in London tonight, where in about 2 hours, British MPs will have their say in a second historic vote on Brexit, a do-or-die moment for the UK Prime Minister Theresa May. And we have special coverage live from London and the European Parliament here in Strasbourg. This is Raw Politics. Thank you for joining us tonight and on this special edition of the program. And here is what we have for you coming up. Down to the wire, the 11th hour trip and last-minute deal. Will it be enough to get Theresa May's Brexit deal over the line? Read the fine print. The UK's Attorney General says the legal risk of the much-contested backstop remains in a blow to the UK Prime Minister. No third chances. The EU lays down the law if MPs reject the Brexit agreement tonight. Forecasting May, what this vote could mean for the future of the UK Prime Minister. And sleepless in Strasbourg. Jean-Claude Juncker gets cheeky in tonight's Raw Moment. All right, welcome to this program tonight and to a potentially historic evening for the future of the UK and the EU. Now, in about 2 hours, British MPs will vote on Theresa May's Brexit agreement, a deal complete with a last-minute change won in Strasbourg last night. But after a big blow to May's plan today, there are no guarantees. May is fighting for more than just Brexit. Her political life may well be on the line, and she insists her final dash to Strasbourg worked and that she has won the legally binding changes she needs. But today came the legal advice that Mrs. May had been dreading. Now, the Attorney UK General Geoffrey he says that despite months of haggling, negotiating and pleading with the EU, the legal risks surrounding the Irish backstop have not changed. Now, that's been the key sticking point for those against the agreement. Let's take a look at some of the highlights of the debate. Well, there were very fun debates today at the Parliament, a lot of exchanges and definitely a lot of tension. Now, the UK Attorney General's job is to give that independent legal advice to the government, and he set out his advice today, his thoughts on the Brexit vote. Let's take a listen to that one.
Let me make it clear. The legal risk, as I set it out in my letter of the 13th of November, remains unchanged. The question for the House is whether, in the light of these improvements, as a political judgment, the House should now enter into those arrangements.
And joining us now on this dramatic day in Westminster is our political editor, Darren McCaffrey. Darren, you were watching today the debate going on. There were a lot of exchanges, definitely getting a feel of how MPs are feeling. How is it looking like tonight, how people are going to be voting, and what are the chances that May could actually get her deal through?
Well, Theresa May has been battling this afternoon to try and convince many within her own party and indeed MPs across the boards that they should back her deal after that historic defeat back in January when MPs had their first chance to vote on her withdrawal agreement. It looks like she is going to lose yet again tonight, Tessa, given the fact that the Democratic Unionist Party, the Northern Irish MP supporting her Conservative government, and the ERG, those Brexiteers within the party, many of them essentially saying they cannot vote for this deal, that the legal guarantees they wanted are not there, that despite what she got in Strasbourg last night, it is not enough. And on that basis, as I said, it is likely she will lose the vote tonight. The question is almost not if, but by how much. And there is lots of rumours here at Westminster that if the majority by which she loses is not that big, that a third attempt later on this month, potentially after the next EU Council summit, that Theresa May could yet again bring back this vote to Parliament in the hope that she can finally get it over the line. But what is the mood of MPs from across the board? Earlier on today, I spoke to 4 different MPs from 4 different parties here at Westminster about what they thought of Geoffrey Cox's advice and how they thought the vote would go tonight. Let's have a listen. What's your impression of what Geoffrey Cox has said today? Has he killed off May's deal?
He's held it below the waterline as far as I can see. He's clearly been determined to stick to his word. He said that he wouldn't change his opinion if he didn't feel that the risk had lessened of Britain being able to get out of the backstop, as it were, and he doesn't think that risk has lessened, and therefore he's said what he said, which is to, I think, make it impossible for the ERG and the DUP, if they are to be true to their word, to support it.
We vote tomorrow on whether we should crash out without a deal, which would be catastrophic. I don't think Parliament will go anywhere near that. And if that's voted down, then we have the issue of a postponement. But that begs the whole question, what's the postponement for? Simply perpetuating this argument isn't about the existing deal, takes us nowhere. I would argue we've got to go now to the country, and the Prime Minister's got to test her deal with public opinion as against the option of staying in the European Union, in other words, a referendum.
Nothing's changed. And instead of focusing on the substance of our future relationship with our European partners, such as education, jobs, the economy, all these things that will be worst hit by Brexit, we're talking about process and tinkering with a deal that doesn't really mean anything to jobs and to people out there.
I think the European Union's given us a thoroughgoing punishment beating. I think they've been extremely difficult and intransigent all the way through. They've given us absolutely nothing whatsoever, and I despise them for it. The way they've handled this negotiation is precisely why we want to leave the European Union. These blighters think they're pretty clever fellows. We Brits are going to show them they're not.
Well, it has been a pretty torrid day yet again for Theresa May. Let's get the view, though, of what Jonathan List thinks. He is a deputy director of the think tank British Influence and has been following events here in Parliament and indeed the Brexit process over the last couple of years. Jonathan, first of all, just kind of talk us through what did Theresa May achieve last night in Strasbourg, and why is it not enough for many of her own MPs?
She achieved almost nothing. All that she managed was to solidify, if you like, the guarantees which the EU had already made in exchange of letters in January. But that was woefully inadequate. She set out to do two things. In fact, she promised two things. The first was that she would reopen the withdrawal agreement. The second, that she would actually try and replace the backstop with alternative arrangements. She didn't manage to do either of those things, and as such, the Attorney General was unable to adjust his legal advice that we cannot unilaterally exit the backstop, and there can be no set exit date for that backstop.
Is there a little bit of glimmer of a hope in the sense that many with MPs within her party, even though they don't like her deal, now view that Brexit may well be in peril, or that there will be a softer form of Brexit, and actually, maybe not tonight, but maybe next week, might back her deal?
That is the calculus that everyone's talking about. It's not going to be about Remainers particularly. It's not going to be about Labour MPs. And I don't think it'll be about the DUP either, because I don't think they can vote for this deal under any circumstances. So what it will come down to is the hardcore Brexiters in the Tory party. Now, some of them will do exactly as you say. They will think, well, this Brexit is imperfect, but at least it gets us over the line and delivers us our life goal. But others will be mindful that the Brexit they've been dreaming about is never going to come to fruition. And what we have here is a woefully inadequate deal, which they will have to take the blame for. And so, you know, the old adage goes, never get what you wish for in life. It might be convenient for some to choose the kind of valiant defeat of remaining and a long and glorious martyrdom than actually accept this painful ordeal of May's Brexit, for which they'll have to take their share of responsibility.
And just finally, what does happen next if May's deal is voted down? You know, Britain is due to leave the European Union in 17 days. What happens next?
Well, inevitably, Parliament will vote against a no-deal scenario tomorrow, and then on Thursday, if that's when the vote is held, they will vote to request an extension to Article 50, which the EU will certainly grant. And then we move to the European Council next week, and that's when things get really interesting, because then we decide how long that extension is going to be. The EU is saying that if we stay after May the 23rd, we have to take part in European elections. Now, that is going to be the next, sacred cow that we have to slay, because everyone's been saying we can't take part in these European elections. The first grown-up in the room is going to have to say, actually, we do have to, because there's no alternative other than May's deal or no deal.
Jonathan List, thank you very much indeed. There you go, one perspective here from Westminster among many. It is yet again quite a vocal night here outside Parliament with two different groups of supporters pitched against each other, those that want Britain to leave and those very much that want Britain to remain in. There is one glimmer of hope tonight, Tessa, for Theresa May. That is the possibility that many of those Brexiteers, despite saying they dislike her deal, despite saying that Geoffrey Cox's legal advice doesn't go far enough and that what she got in Strasbourg was not good enough, that it may well be that they back her deal. As I say, not tonight, but potentially next time, maybe after that EU Council summit, because they would rather her deal than Brexit, as they say, being put into peril. That essentially it could mean, of course, a second referendum or a general election and Brexit not happening at all. Things are very fluid here. Politics is very much in flux. Anything could really happen, but be in no doubt, Theresa May is not just battling tonight to save her withdrawal agreement, but battling also, it must be said, to save her premiership and control of this process.
All right, thanks for that, Darren McCaffrey. And I can see the activity there behind you at Westminster. All right, joining me here in the studio is a British MEP and Deputy Leader of the Conservatives in the European Parliament, Jacqueline Foster, and a fellow British MEP and Leader of UKIP, Gerard Batten. All right, we heard from what Darren was saying there about potentially how MPs are going to vote, particularly the DUP and the ERG, the European Research Group within the Tory party. All right, does Theresa May actually, is it more than just wishful thinking, or is there actually a chance, I'll ask you, Jacqueline, that her deal will get voted through, or what is happening here?
Well, I'm absolutely very hopeful that the deal goes through. I think there is a huge risk when we're looking at Brexit now, and I think people are going to have to think long and hard. We've just listened to 4 members of Parliament, 3 of which from opposition parties who would never support any deal, so it wouldn't matter what the deal was on the table, and then another who seems to be on the other far side, basically, who again wouldn't support the deal. So I just think I was satisfied with the additional reassurances and legal issues that the Attorney-General has actually negotiated and did explain, because there's just the one paragraph 19.
You were satisfied with that?
I am satisfied with that.
But
I think
seems like he wasn't.
No, because what you have just pointed out, as others, is one paragraph out of an entire document. And if anybody had have listened to the Attorney-General's question time today, basically in the House of Commons, he didn't flinch from any points that were brought to him, and he explained far more clearly, just in terms of where we'd managed to reinforce what the position was for the UK, i.e. Northern Ireland, as well as the Republic of Ireland.
But wasn't the last point the most important?
With the backstop position.
But was it the last point the most important, that the risk remains? OK, I'll put that to you,
This is what he said. He said basically the risk is slightly reduced, but isn't really reduced, because the whole point about this risk in these negotiations is that you have to prove bad faith on behalf, in our case, on behalf of the European Union, if they create problems for us. And it's a well-known principle in negotiations. You can't prove bad faith if both parties are trying to negotiate in terms of their own personal or national interest. So you'll never prove that anyway. So it doesn't actually help us at all. The whole thing was just words. And of course, he's a professional lawyer, and he's spoken in these very careful terms today, because he's not just an MP, but he has to protect his personal reputation and professional reputation as a lawyer.
Oh, I think that's to turn around and say that the Attorney-General that actually has to represent the British government, whatever party, is acting in his own sort of personal capacity.
I didn't say that. I said that he... No, I didn't say that. I said he has... I said that he is a professional lawyer with a professional reputation to keep, which is why he's been very careful about the words he's used, because he is not going to just say something is when it isn't, because it has more than just political consequences for him, but his reputation as a lawyer.
Right at all.
And he knows,
no, that's not correct.
He knows that these are just loads of words that don't actually mean anything at the end of the day.
What more can the EU do? These are legally binding. It's said in the document as well that you cannot reopen the withdrawal agreement, but here you have the most that the EU can give in terms of giving that confidence.
I think this is why it will fail tonight.
So but it is assuming. So basically, Brexiteers are assuming, like yourself, are assuming that this is going to be based on bad faith.
I think the big problem that we've had for the whole of the last 2.5 years is we have a Prime Minister and a government and a majority of the House of Commons and House of Lords that don't want to leave anyway, which is why we've ended up with this ridiculous agreement that nobody wants. It doesn't satisfy Remainers who don't want to leave, and it doesn't satisfy Leavers who want to leave, because under this it's a not really leaving withdrawal agreement. And don't forget, if I can make the point, the withdrawal agreement just sets out the basis that we leave, but it is the political declaration that will form the basis for the ongoing relationship agreement, and that binds us into the EU in all kinds of ways. So we are really heading for a not really leaving deal, even if it was accepted.
No,
well, you probably haven't read it.
I can listen to your points all night. However, if we look at Northern Ireland, and it's not just the DUP, we have a good working relationship with 10 members of Parliament from the DUP, which was agreed at the last election. But the DUP doesn't represent the entire population of Northern Ireland or the electorate. And even when the original withdrawal agreement came forward last November, businesses, the fishermen, the farmers, they have all said that they want this withdrawal agreement put in place. And they are supportive of that. And I would urge, therefore, my colleagues in the DUP to listen to them too. I have family who come from Northern Ireland. I would never support a position where Northern Ireland, as part of the United Kingdom, ended up in jeopardy. But I don't believe it's ever been in the EU's interests either to put us in a position where we were then left in limbo after a period of time. I don't believe that that's the case.
That there are people, there are growing, maybe politicians who would actually prefer a no deal, that this might be the better option? Is that growing?
I don't think it is growing, but I believe there's always been a hardcore from both sides, whether the Remainers or whether they hardcore Leavers, that wouldn't mind having a no deal. They think that I think I've said it before, they think that the answer to everything is Norway plus.
Your colleagues probably think
I've said Norway plus plus, or
Norway
they've
plus
also said
the
it may be another plus plus. I've said the rate they're going when we're looking at the Labour Party. The only thing Jeremy Corbyn's talked about today was not the withdrawal agreement. He's talking about actually what we need to do in the future.
This whole thing about
they'll end up with momentum plus plus.
We don't want Norway plus. We don't want Switzerland plus. We want to leave. Now, the only way that we're ever going to leave is by doing it under our own steam and leaving. No, it's not at any cost. It's at our benefit, because we will take control of the process. And all this stuff about trade, we can go on to Article 24 of the WTO terms, if we so wish, and the EU could agree that as well, whereby everything stays the same for up to 10 years while we negotiate a new trading relationship. This whole thing... you've had quite a long go, so let me finish.
No, because
you've had quite a long go. No, I am right.
No, you're not.
You can go on Article 24 if you want to, or we could say to the EU, you can have continued tariff-free trade, or we go on to WTO terms. It's up to you. It's your decision, because it will be anyway. And then we can sort out all the other myriad of EU laws which have been passed over us, but we'll only do that if we take control of the process.
Okay. We're running out of time on this. We'll leave it at that for now. As we mentioned, now the main stumbling block for the Brexit deal surrounding the controversial backstop or the Irish border, we brought that up earlier already, and the day began with some, cautious optimism from the Irish Prime Minister, and here he is.
In many ways, Brexit has been a dark cloud over us for many months, and in particular the threat of no deal. A positive vote tonight can remove that cloud and restore confidence and optimism in Britain, Ireland and across the European Union. We now need to see the withdrawal agreement ratified by Westminster and the European Parliament without further delay, so that we can get on with the important work of building a new relationship between the EU and the UK, and between the UK and Ireland post-Brexit.
Well, our correspondent, Shona Murray, she's been talking to Irish MEPs here in Strasbourg today, and she's joining me now from the Parliament. Shona, the core of all of this really is the Irish backstop. So you have been talking to the Irish MEPs here. What have they been telling you?
Well, it's a broad church of MEPs that represent Ireland in the European Parliament, Tessa. So from the sort of centre-right to the far left. And so rarely would you ever get them united on any issue. But one thing they're united on is what the Irish government and the European Union has been doing to protect the Good Friday Agreement. And they say the only way of doing that is by having the backstop, making sure the backstop isn't diminished in any way, by having a time limit to it, by having a unilateral withdrawal. And I spoke to some MEPs, again, a broad church, and here's what they had to tell me about tonight's vote.
I think we have gone as far as we can. President Juncker said it very clearly last night. He said sometimes the country is given a second chance, and if you are, you take it. There will be no third chance. So he said it clearly. I don't think Ireland should move. The UK have to sort out their own issues.
All we can do is sit back and see what the United Kingdom are going to do. What will they do tomorrow? If they fail to agree to withdrawal agreement tonight, will they vote, which they would be expected to, hopefully not to crash out, and then the merry-go-round would probably start again.
I don't think there's any better deal in town, and I think if they voted this through the House of Commons, it would solve an awful lot of problems.
At this stage, we're bystanders. It's done. The second chance was last night here in Strasbourg. There is no third chance.
So Tessa, there you go. A broad church of Irish MEPs, but all of the same position that the backstop has to remain in place. We heard there from the Irish Prime Minister, Leo Varadkar. That was very much early this morning when there was a level of cautious optimism that perhaps Theresa May could get this deal over the line in the House of Commons. When I spoke to those MEPs, it was clear at that stage that Geoffrey Cox wasn't going to be able to endorse this message. So I have to say, as we heard there, the MEPs saying that they would remain resolute in defending the backstop, remain resolute in defending the European Union's position. Even people like Luke Ming Flanagan, a far left MEP who is incredibly Eurosceptic on most days, but even he is urging Theresa May to go ahead with this deal, saying basically it's the only deal in town. So that is a really quite a rare thing to see. Now, I've been speaking to sources here in the European Parliament and back in Ireland and in Brussels who are really fearful of what's going to happen over the next few hours. They say all bets are off, that there is no more to give from Jean-Claude Juncker or the European Union, and even if they did, they could never trust that Theresa May could get it over the line in the House of Commons. Tessa.
All right, thank you for that. Our correspondent, Shona Murray, there giving us the perspective from the Irish MEPs. All right, joining us now to discuss this is Matt Carthy. He is an Irish MEP who sits with the GUE-NGL group here in the European Parliament. All right, Matt, what is the view? Shona there was mentioning, talking to the different MPs from the different parties in Ireland. The backstop still is crucial here, but nothing really has changed, really.
Yeah,
has it?
Well, no, nothing has changed. In fact, we've had so many movements over the past day and a half that we're back where we started, so to speak. And yes, the backstop is crucial. The withdrawal agreement as it currently stands, let's be very clear,
are you happy?
is the
Yeah.
least worst option. There is no such thing as a good Brexit from an Irish point of view. Brexit is going to damage all of Ireland. And what we're going to see tonight, apparently, in the House of Commons is once again British politicians voting against the directly expressed wishes of the people of the north of Ireland. So I think what we're going to see now is a whole new level of discussion in terms of where the future of the entire island of Ireland lies in a post-Brexit scenario.
We just had Jacqueline Foster earlier who was saying that actually if you read the document, it is not entirely empty as others would analyse it. But are you happy with what Theresa May had brought back from last night?
Well, from an Irish point of view, the withdrawal agreement and the backstop within it and the protections that it offered, recognising that they don't go as far as many of us would have liked from an Irish point of view, is the best possible deal at this stage because Brexit creates so many complications, so many implications and potentially devastating consequences for our political, our economic and our social development as a whole island, and particularly the Good Friday Agreement.
I'm sorry, I just don't get this. Why would an independent sovereign nation like Ireland feel that it cannot exist outside of the European Union, or if Northern Ireland, as you part of the UK, lives, that suddenly it's going to cause all this national devastation? It would be this is a totally false argument that's been created over the Irish border. You have two sovereign nations, the UK and the Republic of Ireland, who, when the UK leaves, can carry on their relations in terms of trade and people moving backwards and forwards across the border, just as they do now, if they wanted to.
But
This isn't an Irish border problem. This is a Brussels problem who created this problem in order to try and stop the UK leaving the European Union.
All that exposes is the ignorance that lies at the heart of the Brexit process when it comes to Ireland. It is a complete lack of understanding of how Ireland operates and how the border in particular has impacted. Because the border we have in Ireland is already too hard. The border region, for example, has the highest levels of immigration, of poverty, of the lowest rates of investment, either public or private. And the reason for that is because borders cost. That's recognised at an EU level. Unfortunately, isn't recognised within the Brexit here movement. And essentially, what is happening here is a lack of understanding of what the Good Friday Agreement was laid on. Because yes, the Irish and British governments are sovereign, but there's a disputed place which is the north of Ireland.
But I mean, people more than just
I've said they want to remain part of the European Union.
I can understand where Matt's coming from, because he wants the Northern Ireland to become part of the Republic of Ireland, and that's a perfectly understandable point of view from his political perspective. But there is a border, yes, there's a border with a currency border. There's goods moved backwards and forwards. All the goods are checked in warehouses before they get to the border anyway. So there's no reason why what we've got now couldn't continue perfectly normally if the Republic of Ireland and the UK agreed that. Brussels doesn't need to be involved.
Well, can I ask a question of how this would work? So, you, as a self-confessed Brexiteer, want to see Britain negotiate free trade agreements?
If that's appropriate, we can trade under WTO terms.
So say you move outside into the WTO terms, and you enter into a free trade agreement with Mercosur countries, for example, and decide that you're going to import their cheaply produced food imports into the British market. If that enters into the north of Ireland, and if there aren't border controls, well, then that means that the EU market is contaminated with this cheaply produced food, and that creates the border scenario. So what we're saying is that there is no circumstances that we're going to allow that to happen, because that damages our farmers north and south.
What you're saying is that then we shouldn't allow our people who are on lower incomes to be able to buy cheaper food, because that actually is damaging to people who produce dearer food.
No, what I'm saying is,
the purpose of trade,
you can do what you want.
The purpose of trade is to be the most beneficial terms for the broad mass of people. So this is an argument for actually getting out of the common agricultural policy and taking control of trade policy. Because don't forget, what the European Union is not a free trade area, it's a customs union. It's designed to put barriers up from trade from outside of the European Union.
If people are mad enough to believe what Gerard has said, that is absolutely within their right. And the people of England and the people of Wales can decide to do that. But they don't get to take part of my country down that cul-de-sac with them, because what he is proposing in that instance is withdrawing from the common agricultural policy, reverting to a cheap food policy. Everybody loses. Our farmers, our communities, and our economy. And
how does everybody lose?
I'll give you the last one. Go ahead. You have to move on.
How does everybody lose if you can reduce prices for the broad mass of people?
Okay.
Because it puts our farmers off.
All right, we'll leave it at that for now. Clearly, this is such a contentious part. We'll have to leave that argument for now. We've heard from the politicians, but now we have to hear from the people who will actually be affected by Brexit, which you have been both talking about. Let's look at what Londoners had to say this morning ahead of tonight's Brexit vote.
I think it's going to get rejected. Well, I very much hope so. Voters remain European, so I very much hope it's thrown out.
You don't have a clear indication if the MPs are going to vote for May's deal, what he's negotiating, or not.
I think that the general public just don't want Brexit anymore. I don't think they ever did. They just didn't realise it at the time.
It seems to me like nobody can make up their mind. Everybody is saying what's wrong with it, but nobody's coming up with any sort of solution.
People are starting to realise that it's just not going to happen. And it shouldn't, hopefully. I'm going to go skiing next week.
Okay, you heard that man who was saying probably British people don't want Brexit anymore.
Well, you talk to one man in the street. I could take you to other places in London where everybody would agree that they voted to leave and they want to get out. So it depends where you go and who you are. I don't want another referendum, because we don't need one. We had a referendum. But I think if there was a referendum on do you want to leave or remain, actually Leave would win by a bigger margin.
You think so?
Yes, I do.
Well, listen, as I say, whatever the people of England want to do, that's up to them. But the people in the north of Ireland already voted, and they voted overwhelmingly to remain part of the European Union. Unfortunately, the British government, for all their talk about consent, have decided to ignore that decision. The only way that we can actually protect those people to some degree is through the withdrawal agreement that is there. And it appears that tonight British MEPs by a significant majority are going to vote against the expressed wishes of the people of the north of Ireland. I think that's going to send a very strong signal in terms of the future constitutional questions.
All right, that no one...
I think the only thing we agree on is that they're going to vote against it.
Well, there you go. All right, out of time for this one. Coming up on Raw Politics, a final offer. That's what the EU Commission President Jean-Claude Juncker had to say about the latest Brexit agreement. But what does the rest of the EU 27 think? That's still ahead. Don't go away.